Anka's mother is dead. She's been dead since 5 days after her birth. So she's never known her mother. But her mother left a letter behind for her daughter, supposedly telling her that Mikhail, that's the father's name, is not her real father. Now she discovers this letter. We think that she's opened it, read it, the contents of which Mikhail himself wasn't even sure of, but he always had a suspicion that he wasn't her real father. And anyway, so when she confronts him, it basically creates an opening for them to begin to interrogate and expose what has otherwise been kind of repressed or confused, not wholly understood emotions between the two of them, specifically romantic, or at least what they think may be romantic attractions. But, you know, I'm not entirely sold by the end of it that they're even understanding their own conflict. You know, for instance, the father speaks about jealousy, like a jealousy that he feels toward her boyfriends, and a pain that he's felt, that he's always respected her freedom. She can go and do what she wants, and that he'll suffer it. And then basically in light of this discovery that he's not her real father, he interprets that as a romantic jealousy. He says specifically that it was more than the kind of jealousy that you would expect a father to have for their daughter. But then again, who's he to say?
So you think that he's like reinterpreting that in light of
I think that there's reason to think that, because who is he to say, you know, that what he's experienced isn't in fact the experience of a father's jealousy, you know?
That's a good point.
And that who is he to say that it might not somehow be also bound up with like a weird, at least in his instance, with like a weird tension that he might misconstrue as a romantic one, you know? Right. Of course, I'm not saying that this is the case for all fathers. You know, I don't know much about Freudian psychology, but you know, it seems to me like Freud might have a field day with a film like this. But at least in his instance, I think that there is a struggle to sort of contextualize or understand the feelings that he has for his daughter, and that that you know, for whatever reason, in light of this, you know, consequent to this discovery that he's not her real father, there's a reevaluation that's going on.
I kind of wonder if she could be doing the same thing to some extent. I mean, she talks about, you know, when I started sleeping with boys, I felt like I was betraying someone, and now I've realized it was you.
Yeah.
And then she kind of like says stuff that kind of like sexualizes that as like, you know, that they were like a sexual stand-in for him or something. But what the first thing she says, I think, is like, you know, I thought I was betraying someone, and now I've realized it's you.
But, you know, it's like, yeah, that's a really excellent point. Like, is she really realizing that? Or is she looking for a scapegoat, you know, for a stinging conscience?
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking the second time we were watching it. Like, you know, she is betraying a father, and there might be some sense in which she's betraying her actual, you know, biological father. I think that's you know, what she says there is normal. Mm-hmm. She sexualizes it, but that base thing of feeling like you're betraying your parents,
because a father is involved in this somehow, and that's acknowledged by the mother of her boyfriend. She goes over to her boyfriend's home, and he's not home, so she speaks with his mother and basically expresses interest in marrying him. Mm-hmm. And her boyfriend's mother, the first thing she asks is, well, what about your father?
Yeah.
And now, I mean, she's not asking that because she's aware of this sort of like weird thing that's going on. She's acknowledging what I think, you know, everybody really acknowledges, that somehow the father does have a part to play in this. So So yeah, I'm glad too that you brought up God the Father, because I can't watch a movie like this that so much deals with the role of the father, the identity of the father, without thinking about sort of the broader implications of that. Whether culturally, so thinking about tradition, belonging, history, but then also, of course, like our ultimate identity as children of a loving father.
And the first two films are about fatherhood.
I mean, even the third film is fathers have been central to all of the Decalogue films that we've seen so far on this podcast, on this channel. In fact, we see.
I would say fatherhood to me is more central to the second film than motherhood is, even though the main character is the mother.
Yep. Yep. I agree. And we see one of these father figures reappear in the elevator of this film.
Yeah.
The doctor.
From number 2.
Yep. Repression is when you're not talking about it, when you're not acknowledging
when you're not admitting it.
Right.
So it's like, no, I don't have these feelings. Like suppression is like, I have these feelings and I'm choosing to.
In fact, her father is in an act of repression. Even when she begins to confront him about these things, she says, how she felt this sort of sense of betrayal when she was with her boyfriends. He says, I never felt that.
Yeah.
She says, you're lying. And he says, yeah, I'm lying. So
that's
I think
interesting
that
too, because it goes along with his decision to, I don't have a right to tell you not to do things, which is obviously wrong.
Yeah.
And he says that because he's afraid that it'll be jealousy if he does that. So it goes both ways. He's denying the jealousy that he does have, and then not doing his duty as a father.
That's
because
right.
He's afraid it'll be jealousy. And I'm certain, I've heard many people, many fathers or expectant fathers, or I'm out in the secular world, Louis C.K., the disgraced, the late Louis C.K.
Great.
He would, I remember hearing him one time talk about in an interview or something, just your daughter's gonna just to put it, mildly, she's going to start having sex with boys, and you have, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you just have to accept it, and it's none of your business, and all this stuff. And that's a very typical attitude. Fathers feel like they don't have the right to control their daughters.
Well, there's just even more broadly speaking,
down.
Thomas, even more broadly speaking, there's a lot of fathers who just don't think that they're the head of a household.
Right.
Who just don't think that they have any right to exercise any authority at all.
Yeah, right.
And I think that we get the impression that this father is kind of a father like that.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think we have reason to think that her frustration as a daughter comes in a large part from that. She's angry at him
for being accepting, but also indifferent.
Exactly, but also for trying to resolve things without having to do anything. I think that's a quote that I wrote down.
That's right. She says that. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. All right.
Yeah, well, so he moves from repression to suppression through this film.
Yes.
She moves from a confused relationship with her father to, at the end, she opens the window and calls out after him, Dad, Dad. And her final one is Daddy. You really don't say that to anyone other than your daddy.
Right.
So I think that there is a sense in which there is some real closure. Maybe not everything is but none of these films have been
I think so.
tightly.
I think so. I think you're right.
Resolved.
Yeah. Well, but no, it's very interesting that she specifically resents him for his laissez-faire kind of attitude. Take note, fathers. The character in this film, she's resentful of the fact that her father doesn't set boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
She's resentful of the fact his acceptance comes to her as indifference and almost as a callousness, I think, specifically. So, she mentions that she had an abortion and she didn't want to give him what he wanted, his ability to, I don't know what she thought he wanted her to have her baby for. But
so that the tension between them would be resolved.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Without him having to do anything. Yeah. And then she, didn't tell him about it because she didn't want to hear from him. Like, yeah, go ahead and have an abortion. Like, it's not my business,
Right.
So like, yeah, I mean, that's a real thing,
Mm-hmm.
Children want their parents to care, to be involved. They want them to exercise their authority. They want to be
Right.
protected. They want to be guided. So I think that, to simply like write it off as like this like patriarchal oppression, the idea that like a father would like prevent his daughter from sleeping around, at a young age is like, I think that's just really blind, and it plays into a lot of selfish impulses that men have.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a unwillingness to put yourself out there. There is a kind of vulnerability in exercising your authority.
Yes.
And vulnerability is a theme in this as well. That's put on display really clearly in the acting class,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all about, being vulnerable. He's trying to push her to be vulnerable. And then later she's pushing her father to do the same.